a special program in living color on NBC.
Drummond MacDougall. The very name today conjures up an image of a stern, unsmiling, bearded fanatic renowned for his unyielding dedication to the enjoyment of single malt Scotch whiskey. But long before the achievements and the accolades, and many years before the long, slow decline into scandal and madness, there was a story of a young boy who overcame grinding poverty and woeful ignorance to found the Single Malt Society, now regarded as the finest Scotch whiskey club in the Western world. Behind every great social movement is a legend. Here now is The Legend of Drummond MacDougall. Part 1. The Early Years. Magnus and Maggie MacDougall were common peasants, eking out a meager living in Glenfirth, a small village in the hinterlands of the Scottish Highlands. They lived a frugal life, with simple dreams, simple needs, and even simpler minds. Benjamin Van Scoik is the author of the definitive biography of Drummond MacDougall. More whiskey, damn it!
One cannot presume to understand a man as complex as Drummond MacDougall without understanding his upbringing, and that starts with his parents, Magnus and Maggie. Rather late in their marriage, they were shocked to discover that Maggie was pregnant, the result, legend has it, of an evening spent enjoying a particularly potent batch of homegrown whiskey distilled in the family washtub, which, legend also has it, was rarely used for washing.
On February 17, 1843, Maggie gave birth to a son, Drummond. She was assisted in what proved to be a difficult labor by a local midwife, Kyla Montgomery, a mean-tempered, mean-spirited woman who would, in later years, achieve notoriety as Drummond's stepmother and lifelong nemesis. Drummond was born in the parlor of the one-room MacDougall homestead, which was photographed here in the early 1920s after many years of neglect. Now a treasured Scottish national landmark, the homestead has been restored to the way it appeared when the MacDougalls lived there, as shown in this recent photograph.
By all accounts, Drummond's early years were difficult indeed, due partly to his frail health, partly to the family's dire financial straits, and partly to the fact that he was being raised by parents with simple minds.
Little is known of Drummond's life in those early formative years, other than the fact that Magnus and Maggie took on a series of odd jobs in their struggle to provide for their beloved son, whom they called Little Drummy. Archie Ferguson is the president of the Single Malt Society and has authored a history of that revered drinking society entitled, "What Did You Expect for $28 a Session?"
It wasn't easy for Magnus and Maggie, what with their advanced age and total lack of marketable skills. I mean, these two were as dumb as a bag of kilt buckles. We do know that Magnus, despite hip problems which necessitated the use of 2 walking canes, worked as a paperboy to help put food on the table. And poor Maggie, who suffered from both fallen arches and fallen heels, brought in extra money serving as a human mule toting blocks of peat to local whiskey distilleries. Who knows, maybe that's where Drummond got his love of peaty scotches.
The plucky parents did their best to give their little Drummy a proper appreciation of Scottish culture. Shown here is a rare photograph of the family walking to Glasgow to attend Haggis Fest 1849. Not much is known about Drummond until he left for college in 1861. Magnus and Maggie has saved enough for Drummond's train fare to the port town of Aberdeen, where he had been accepted to the prestigious University of Arts and Applied Applications, pending payment of his first semester tuition. Unfortunately, Drummond's plan to secure a summer job to earn the necessary tuition funds were soon dashed.
Aberdeen, like every city in the Northern Highlands, and indeed throughout Scotland, was caught up in a Great Depression in 1861, which historians refer to as the Great Depression of 1861. This was a period of severe economic hardship brought on by a total collapse of the haggis industry due to a rampant outbreak of Asian sheep blight.
Jobs were scarce. Drummond, desperate for work, was forced to take the only job offered to him, as an entry-level fish parts sorter for a down-on-its-luck trawling operation. Every morning, Drummond trudged 3 miles to the wharf, where for 12 grueling hours he sorted into separate piles the various fish heads, fins, tails, and scales which had broken off as the fishing nets were empty.
This was a filthy job to be sure, but one at which he excelled. It seems that Drummond had, As they say in the fishing industry, a head for fish.
His orderly, imaginative fish part sorting soon caught the eye of the cash-strapped company owner, a young widow named Lucille Mulroney, who was finding it increasingly difficult to run the company by herself. Recognizing in Drummond a rare combination of intelligence, perseverance, and the willingness to actually touch those filthy fish parts, she offered him a partnership in the company. He quickly graduated from fish part sorting to manning the door-to-door fish cart. A young mustachioed Drummond is seen here before developing his signature unruly beard, which was to become his trademark look for the next 6 decades. Eventually, the long hours spent working together led to a greater intimacy between young Drummond and the lonely Lucille, aided by the fact that he was a devilishly handsome fellow, despite his rather poor grooming and astonishing lack of a personal hygiene regimen. Despite the difference in age, she was a decade older. The difference in temperaments, he was calm and steady, she was high-strung and quick to anger. And the difference in height, at 6'5", she stood taller than him by more than a foot. In June of 1863, they were joined together in what would be a tempestuous matrimony. We'll learn about this misguided entry into the fish industry and marriage in Part 2 of The Legend of Drummond MacDougall, Aberdeen Fishmonger, or Before the Whiskey.